Welcome to today's public lecture, and we have a presentation by Girma Kelboro, who is talking about rural-urban interfaces in Ethiopia. So the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Andreas, for your kind introduction, and also thank you for giving me this chance, the whole colloquium organizing team or this public lecture organizing team. I thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I appreciate your interest and participation. Thank you very much for joining this presentation. It is a research project, not results, the research project on transitions in rural-urban interfaces. The focus is on urbanization, land governance, and livelihood in Ethiopia. And this is a project, a research project funded by the German Research Foundation, DFG. When we talk about rural-urban interfaces, urbanization is a very crucial topic or crucial issue because it induces changes to the rural atmosphere. It influences and changes land uses, actors, institutions, and the whole socioeconomic setting of the area. So we can say that urbanization is a complex socioeconomic process which transforms the built environment. It converts rural areas to urban settlements. It also shifts the spatial distribution of population from rural to urban areas. And urbanization also includes changes in the demography, social structure, culture, behavior, lifestyle, a source of livelihood, and many more. When we look at the global situation in 2018, UN had reported that 55% of the world's population resided in urban areas. And when we look a bit back in history, few years back in history, in 1950, for example, 30% of the world's population was urban. And a little bit into the future, by 2050, 68% of the world's population is projected to be urban. You can already see how much urban population is growing. In 2018, it was reported that the most urbanized regions of the world are North America, with 82% urban population, and Latin America and the Caribbean, more or less similar to North American situation. They have 81% urban population. Europe, 74%, Oceania, 68%. If you look at Asia, the level of urbanization is approximately 50%. Africa is mostly rural, with 43% of its population living in urban areas. However, the future will be different. If you look at the future trend, Africa is urbanizing faster than any other continent. And 56% of the population is expected to be urban in 2050. And if you look at the relative distribution of urban population in 2050, most of the urban population will live in Asia and Africa. If you look at this map, this graph diagram, you can see that a lot of population, the largest population will live in Asia, urban population in Asia, and then next second is Africa. Therefore, urbanization is a crucial topic. When we come to Ethiopia, mostly urbanization is about expansion of cities and towns into farmlands and eviction of smallholder farmers from their lands. And we are not always negative about urbanization, because urbanization also brings with it new opportunities, new livelihood sources outside farming. Sometimes it is even a way of improving their living conditions for smallholder farmers. But there are many farmers who may not benefit at all. They lose their farmlands, their livelihoods, and most importantly, their identities. Over time, through generations, people have developed attachment to their local areas, attachment to the networks established in the system, and they have informal mechanisms to benefit from the coexistence in the community, but they will lose all those things. For example, large-scale industrial investments around Addis Ababa, rural areas around Addis Ababa, led to an increase in the number of landless farmers and farmers with small holdings, less than 1 hectare. That was a recent study published in 2020 by Daddy and colleagues. This situation partly contributed to massive outbreaks of social protests in Ethiopia, and of course in other African countries as well. If we look in Ethiopia in 2015, riots about land eviction in the outskirts of Addis Ababa led to hundreds of casualties. When we talk about urbanization and expansion of cities and urban centers in rural areas, or influence of urban centers in rural areas, we talk about rural-urban interfaces. Rural-urban interfaces are also described as urban fringes or transition zones as well. They generally combine rural and urban characteristics. For example, there are smallholding farming practices in those areas, which are typical of rural areas, but also infrastructure is much better in rural-urban interfaces, which is not common in rural areas. So it combines both the rural characteristics and urban characteristics, and therefore it is neither fully urban nor fully rural. And because of this complexity and continuum, rural-urban continuum, it is particularly difficult to make spatial identification and demarcation between rural and urban areas. And these areas are often left in between urban master plans and rural development plans, because of this blurred nature of where the urban ends and the rural begins. There is no special plan for these dynamic zones in most cases. Rural-urban interfaces are also affected by land use, conflicts over land uses. For example, agricultural use, industrial use, residential use, commercial use, recreational use, infrastructure use, waste disposal, waste treatment, and other kinds of land uses conflict with each other. The study on land use and livelihood transitions is crucial nowadays because of the changes taking place in the livelihoods and land governance as a whole, which is affecting the lives of millions of people around the world. Urbanization of rural areas have resulted in socioeconomic and ecological changes, and therefore this research is timely and we think it is very relevant. We will investigate transitions in land governance and livelihoods, taking a case in Ethiopia. And we'll try to identify and understand how urbanization affects livelihoods of smallholder farmers in those areas, in rural-urban interfaces. And we take Hawassa city in Sidama region, which is located in southern part of Ethiopia. Normally, we expect that urbanization brings income generation opportunities and improved livelihood because of markets, jobs, and businesses, and new connections that emerge with urbanization. But we need to understand it in a more analytical way. This analytical approach looks at urbanization and its impact on livelihood on multiple levels. Even if urbanization is assumed to bring opportunities for the farmers, but at the same time, they have also challenges. And this whole thing is not simply local. Even if farmers are observed in their local activities, interacting with the environment and market, the whole activities that we see on the local level is connected to higher level processes. So it is a kind of intersecting analytical levels that we should understand. to really appreciate and think of possible way outs for the farmers from the complex situations that are emerging as a result of urbanization of rural settings. Land governance and livelihood transitions in rural urban interfaces are therefore complex processes. What are transitions? In this context, transitions refer to processes of change in society in which technologies shift, social practices shift, and institutions change. Generally, transition is not stable. It's always a dynamic process. The change that has moved to some level, one level or one form will again evolve into another level. So with this co-evolving process involves co-evolution of economic, cultural, technological, ecological, and institutional developments. And therefore, we can understand them on multiple levels, and transitions can be analyzed using a multi-level governance approach. That is mostly based on research in urban and technological changes and mostly technological transitions. And we can apply this to also livelihood change and land governance transitions. Change is taking place on different levels, international, regional, and national levels influence what's happening in a specific locality, as I tried to explain. And these perspectives on the same spatial area on different levels is part of the risks for societies, as illustrated by Neisser and Muller-Mann in 2018, for example. Again, to strengthen that, city planning in the global south is often carried out based on ideas from the global north. Therefore, local and global are very much connected through knowledge flows, through guidelines, through some NGOs and civil societies, which make it possible to connect the global and the local in different ways. Political influences are also there. Market influences are also there. Trade relationships, power is there. Power relationships between countries and actors, between companies from the local to the global. And often improvements in communication and infrastructure induce flow of ideas, innovations, cultures, and these all influence awareness of people about their environment and what to expect beyond their established territories. Therefore, this multi-level governance character of rural-urban interfaces demands a research approach which looks into the system from a perspective of polycentricity. When we say polycentricity, it is a conceptual understanding of governance practices where we have decision-making units of different units in a given area and over the same resource. If you think of a specific area, there may be informal units that are making decisions, and there may be formal units, all of them making decisions over the same resource. So just to simplify it, polycentricity in governance therefore consists of multiple actors, which are organized and guided through formal or customary institutions, making their own decisions. And this is through their own decision-making units. To analyze these different levels, we look at the three societal levels that were defined through research. One is a niche, known as niche, that is a micro level, which is known as locus of new innovations. And the other is a socio-technical regime, which is a meso level, where established practices and associated roles are observed. And then the third is an exogenous socio-technical landscape, the macro level. I will try to briefly summarize each of these levels. When we look at the niches, these are the micro level, where learning takes place, trial and error takes place, learning by doing, learning by using, learning by interacting. So this is where a lot of experimentation takes place through individuals and small groups of individuals in their daily lives. In these activities, in these processes, these groups or individuals may come up with new technologies, new practices, some group configurations, networks can emerge in these processes. For example, in the case of smallholder farmers, this could be illustrated with new forms of vegetable production because of the emergence of markets through urbanization, or entry into small businesses. This is also innovation, which could be possibly taken by smallholder farmers as individuals or as groups. This is a niche level where a lot of experimentation takes place. And when we move further to the socio-technical regime, here we have a kind of stability, even if it is dynamic, because after the trial and error and experimentation on a niche level, some of the innovations could develop to the level whereby they are adopted to many groups or individuals, and there could be policy support for them, scientific support, and banks support them, and that becomes a kind of level whereby a lot of activities take place after the experimentation in each level. Here we have rules, institutions, which support activities of social groups and material and technical elements in the system, regulative, normative, and cognitive institutions that also facilitate or influence activities of the groups in the socio-technical regime. There are diversity of actors also involved. So this is the level whereby a lot of activities take place and the technologies or innovations are more or less stable, even if the dynamism is there because of new developments, new information, new knowledge coming through science and scientific findings and research findings and inputs, and also companies coming in on this level. The other is the third level, which is known as socio-technical landscape. You can already see from the concept of landscape that it is the highest level where it defines external environment on which actors have no or only limited influence. Smallholder farmers cannot control, for example, climate change or shocks, crisis, trade, some large demographic trends. This gives the socioeconomic landscape level. So with illustration, with drawing, it looks like this. We have a niche level, niche innovation, where a lot of experimentation takes place. Small networks of actors work on novelties. These are, some of them are dropped, others are improved, and the whole process moves up with adoption and expansion into other groups, and moves to the socio-technical regime level, where we have markets, markets user preference, that means science, culture, technology, policy, industry, also with a lot of dynamism on that level as well. And the socio-technical landscape level is at the highest level, where it also, even if it has little control, even if the actors on the niche level have little control on socio-technical landscape, it influences somehow. Sometimes it may have some pressure on the existing system, opening up windows of opportunities for innovations to develop. So there is a lot of process taking place in each of the levels, and then the levels interact also. Before I move on, when we analyze transitions, we don't fix on one level, but we try to understand what takes place on one level and try to link it up to the others. And often the understanding of a transition could be possible in analysis that combines the different levels, because sometimes new innovations, new technologies, new practices that emerge on the lowest possible level, niche level may have connections to changes taking place on the social technical landscape. And then we can understand holistically if we connect that to the possible middle level and high level and low level, all of them together. For this project, we have one main objective. We try to understand transitions at rural-urban interfaces in Hawassa, in southern Ethiopia. And we have three specific objectives for that. The first specific objective is to explore the process of land governance in rural-urban interfaces with emphasis on smallholder farmers. Land is the basis of livelihood for smallholder farmers. That's why we focus on land governance. We try to understand land transfer processes and explain land use transitions. The second specific objective is to identify opportunities and challenges for people associated with transitions. What are the opportunities from the perspective of the people? How do they perceive the opportunities? And then we try to understand their perspective on the challenges and the strategies that they have developed as a response to the challenges they face, and what changes they are experiencing in daily lives and activities, with a focus on smallholder farmers. And the third specific objective is to describe and analyze actors and institutions in the process of these transitions, rural-urban transitions. What changes are taking place on actors, new actors emerging, and previous actors leaving the space, and institutional changes, enforcement mechanisms, conflicts, negotiations or collaborations, and so on. These are the main objectives, the three main specific objectives that we pursue in this project. The analysis of these transitions, land governance and livelihood on the three levels, the niche, regime, and landscape, of course, guided as also in the design of research methods. And in this study, we try to also look at secondary sources with a specific focus on unpublished sources. We have access to published sources, but unpublished sources on the local level cannot be accessed through this common search platform. So it is part of our data collection that we review unpublished sources as well, such as master plans, gray literature, reports, including reports of local language, to address these objectives. A little bit more on the city of Hawassa. Hawassa has been selected as a case study for several reasons. First of all, Hawassa is a young city. It was founded in 1960 as a small settlement of 2,000 people, 400 families of retired soldiers from the Royal Military Service at that time. And then this grew to more than 350,000 people within 50 years time. You can imagine how fast the growth of the population is. And then the population is projected to reach 1 million in 2050. Just to illustrate, between 1973 and 2011, built-up area expanded by 70%. So this is a tremendous growth that Hawassa is expanding. It is a very interesting example of middle-level city in Ethiopia and also in Africa. The second reason is that it is a city of diversity. We have more than 80 ethnic groups in Ethiopia. So practically almost all ethnic groups are represented in Hawassa. So we say it is unity within diversity. So it is an interesting case to understand complexity and dynamics and conflict, as well as coexistence of institutions and cultures in one city. And I personally also lived in the city for more than 10 years and experienced the vast changes the city is undergoing. Therefore, because of my experience and because of my knowledge and network, of course, 10 years before, 10 years, conducting in-depth and empirical fieldwork and getting access to data and information would be relatively easier. Hawassa, again, the other reason is Hawassa illustrates the transitions taking place within highly populated East African Rift Valley, which extends from Ethiopia to Mozambique, and understanding middle-sized African cities urgently needed now because of the fastest changing that these changes taking place in these kinds of cities. And most of the studies so far are concentrated on mega cities and capital cities. So middle-sized cities should be studied, especially in Africa, and this is an urgent issue. And Hawassa is a good example for that. Coming to research methods, we emphasize on combining research tools that enable engaging with people more actively, especially methods that enable us to observe people in everyday situations, perceptions, and the practices, or we can say lived experiences as much as possible. We combine qualitative and quantitative data collection and analysis approaches. For qualitative data, we use mental mapping, transit work, participant observation, and the like, and expert interviews as well. And we use stratified random sampling procedure for semi-structured and structured interviews. Just these are some of my observations. I traveled to the city as part of this proposal writing, and I observed the changes taking place. So this area is mostly newly constructed part of the city, and the area which was grazing land or farmland is converted to a city. I came to Germany in 2009, and when I traveled back to the city in 2018, and in about 10 years time, a lot of changes happened, and it is happening now at this time as well. These are again some of my observations. You can see some cattle here. This is insect, which we call false banana. No, it's not banana, but it's a remnant of the agricultural practice of farmers. Farmers have left this area, construction is taking place, new urban settlers are coming into this area. Small shops, new economic activities emerging. Again, construction activities. Thank you very much for your attention.